Hey friends, I hope that you are well. If we haven't met each other before, my name is Tyler and I'm on staff at the church. Today we find ourselves in a really interesting space. If you have been following along with these video devotionals, you'll know that yesterday we encountered and experienced together the story of the Pentecost, that experience where people were speaking in different languages and bringing a lot of wonderment to other people about what exactly is happening. And then right immediately afterwards, the space we find ourselves in now is a sermon. It is Peter's response to the comment of people that I think they've had too much wine to drink. And Peter responds by saying, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, so no, they're not drunk, but rather there's something happening here. And what Peter shares, and I'm not going to go extensively into that sermon. This is a 5-minute video, so I want to be respectful of that. Is Peter shares two things. Peter shares one, that this prophetic moment, this experience of people speaking in other languages, that's something that we was told about long ago. In the prophet in the book of Joel, we find this language that says all people, and really all people across class and difference and uniqueness, all persons will prophesy. Really an embracing of the Pentecostal moment. So Peter brings that up and says this isn't really that unique or strange or different than our tradition, and rather he builds a bridge back into the tradition. And then Peter makes the second part of his sermon where he really says, Christ being risen from the dead is not novel or entirely new, but is something actually that we find in our shared language of the Psalms. Peter, all the while in this sermon, and why I kind of love these sermons, is being a bridge builder, a connector between the unfamiliarness of the now and saying, y'all, like these things are in our tradition. The space that we're not in is the space that immediately follows this, which is a call really towards repentance and renewal and the life that is offered through God even still. So today, in this moment, we are here in Peter's sermon. And a lot of questions come to mind when I've been reflecting on this sermon. I just went for a walk, and as I was on this walk, I kept thinking over and over in my head how many times we as a society and myself individually have just brushed something away because it was different. If we're honest with ourselves, when we encounter something that's unfamiliar, it can bring about a whole range of emotions rather subconsciously, right? It can bring about emotions of nervousness, of unease. It can bring about emotions of fear. And when there is privilege, even just a few ounces or dashes of privilege in our chemistry of who we are and how we relate to other people, that can also turn to violence. We are so quick to discredit, to brush away that which we haven't seen or recognized before. It's the voice of all the people in that community around Pentecost who just kept saying, I think they've had a little too much wine to drink. Let's stay away from them. And it also is, in the words of all of those who seem to be approaching this message of Christ, in which Peter is so hard at working to establish a bridge and connection to them. And so I think before we get to tomorrow's video, where we find the presence of grace all around us, may we just sit today and be more confessional for a second with ourselves. What are ways in which we discredit experiences of God in our midst because it's different? What are ways in which we discredit people in our midst because they're different from what our own experiences have been. What are the ways in which we've caused harm to others because we've been unwilling to see the sacredness of God in our neighbor? If Pentecost and any of these stories show anything, it's that God works in all persons beyond our barriers, that God is continuing to draw the circle wider and wider and wider. And since God works in and through and around and amongst all of us, may our work be in this day to recognize how we might be standing in the way of that. And may we find, as we'll talk about tomorrow, the grace that comes in that moment of God leading us through. I hope you're well, and I look forward to talking with all of you soon. Take care.